My name is Edwin, and I've always considered myself a brave kid. But that night shattered any illusions I had about my own courage. It started like any other evening. My parents had gone out for dinner, leaving me home alone. I didn't mind. I was used to it. They trusted me, and I liked having the house to myself. I fired up my PlayStation 3, ready to dive into another round of Call of Duty. Little did I know, that would be the least of my concerns. As gunfire erupted on the screen, I was completely immersed in the game. But then, above the sound of explosions and gunfire, I heard it. A faint noise, like something scraping against the back door. I paused the game, removing my headphones to listen more closely. My heart began to race as the noise grew louder, more persistent. Someone was trying to break in. Instinct took over. Without a second thought, I switched off the TV and plunged the room into darkness. I crawled under my bed, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure the intruder could hear it too. I held my breath, trying to suppress the panic rising in my chest. Footsteps echoed through the house, heavy and menacing. Drawers were yanked open, objects clattering to the floor. I clenched my fists, feeling utterly helpless as the intruder ransacked our home. Then, the chilling realization hit me. They were getting closer, inching their way towards my room. He entered my room and I saw his shoes, dirty black shoes. It looked like he was looking around. He walked up to my TV and unplugged my PlayStation. He walked out and continued around the house. Minutes felt like hours as I lay there, paralyzed with fear. Every creak of the floorboard sent a jolt of terror through my veins. I prayed for it to be over, for the intruder to leave without discovering me hiding beneath the bed. Eventually, the footsteps receded, fading into the night. I waited for what felt like an eternity before daring to emerge from my hiding place. The house was silent once more, but the air was heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. I reached for my phone, hands trembling as I dialed my parents' number. Tears welled up in my eyes as I recounted the night's events, my voice barely above a whisper. They rushed home immediately, panic evident in their voices as they assured me they were on their way. When they arrived, we called the police. But despite their best efforts, the intruder was never caught, and many of our possessions, including my beloved PlayStation, were gone forever. That night changed me. It robbed me of my sense of security, leaving behind only a lingering sense of dread. And as I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that the intruder was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike again. Every evening, like clockwork, I'd lace up my sneakers and head out to the gym. The routine had become my sanctuary, a way to shed the day's stress and find some semblance of peace. But that peace was shattered the moment I noticed him, a creepy older guy whose gaze seemed to follow me around the room, every move I made mirrored by his unwavering stare. At first, I convinced myself it was all in my head, but as the days passed, the reality became impossible to ignore. It was a Thursday night, the gym quieter than usual, the hum of the treadmills and the clank of weights filling the space between us. I could feel his eyes on me, heavy and unsettling. I tried to focus on my workout, to lose myself in the rhythm of my breathing, but the sensation of being watched clawed at the edges of my concentration. Closing time approached, and I gathered my things, eager to leave the oppressive atmosphere behind. As I walked to my car, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder. There he was, leaving at the same time, his pace slow, deliberate. My heart began to race as I unlocked my car and slid inside, hoping against hope that I was being paranoid. But as I drove away from the parking lot, a glance in my rearview mirror confirmed my worst fears. His car was following me, maintaining a constant distance. Panic gripped me, and I took a series of turns, trying to lose him in the maze of the city's streets. Eventually, I no longer saw his headlights behind me, and I allowed myself a moment of relief as I pulled into my driveway. The house was dark and quiet as I entered, the familiar surroundings doing little to ease the tightness in my chest. I locked the door behind me, double-checking every window before heading to bed, trying to convince myself that I was safe, that it was all over. But the night was far from peaceful. I woke suddenly, a sense of unease crawling under my skin. The house was silent, too silent, and then I heard it, a faint noise, like someone shifting their weight. My heart stopped. I lay there, frozen, listening. The sound didn't come again, but the fear it had ignited refused to be quelled. I reached for my phone, using it as a makeshift torch as I slowly got up to investigate. The living room was empty, the kitchen too. And then, as I passed by the closet, a sliver of cold dread sliced through me. The door was slightly ajar, a detail I was sure hadn't been the case when I went to bed. With a trembling hand, I pushed the door further open, the light of my phone piercing the darkness. And then I saw it, an eye, gleaming in the dim light, watching me from the darkness of the closet. My scream was a thing alive, tearing through the silence of the night as the phone clattered to the floor, the light extinguishing and plunging me back into darkness. In that moment, I realized that the Jim, the car following me home, had been no coincidence. He had found me, and now, he was here, in my house, hiding in the shadows. The terror of that realization was paralyzing, a nightmare from which there was no waking up. Barefoot and breathless, I dashed outside, my heart hammering against my chest with such force I thought it might burst. The cold night air cut through me, but fear propelled me forward, towards the light and safety I hoped to find at my neighbor's house. My screams shattered the quiet of the neighborhood, a desperate plea for help as I pounded on their door. The neighbors, roused from their sleep by the commotion, opened the door with wide, questioning eyes. Their concern turned to action as they wrapped me in blankets and called the police, their voices a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. But even surrounded by their kindness, I couldn't shake the terror that clung to me, a relentless shadow. When the police arrived, they searched my house with thorough precision, but found no one. Every corner, every possible hiding spot was checked and cleared, yet the feeling of violation lingered, an invisible stain on my once safe haven. I recounted the events to them, my voice trembling as I described the man from the gym, the pursuit, and the chilling discovery in my closet. Determined, the officers went to the gym, seeking to unravel the identity of the man who had so thoroughly invaded my life. Their return brought no comfort, only a deepening dread. The address he had provided to the gym was false, a dead end that led to an abandoned building, and the name he used was likely fictitious as well. The realization that he was a ghost in the system, untraceable and unknown, sent a shiver down my spine. In the days that followed, the normalcy of life seemed like a distant memory, a naive illusion shattered by the reality of my experience. Despite the police's best efforts, there were no leads, no way to trace him. The world felt suddenly larger, darker, filled with unseen dangers that lurked just out of sight. Now, even the most mundane activities are tinged with unease. Sometimes when I'm driving, I'll catch a glimpse of a car that seems to be following a little too closely, its presence a whisper of paranoia in my rearview mirror. Each time my heart skips, fear gripping me with the possibility that it might be him, returning to finish what he started. I've learned to live with this constant vigilance, a part of me forever on the lookout for the man who invaded my life and vanished without a trace. The peace I once took for granted has been irrevocably altered, leaving behind a wariness that colors every moment. And though I may never know if the cars that sometimes follow are mere coincidences, or if he's still out there, watching, the uncertainty has become a haunting companion, a reminder of the night that fear became my reality. The tranquility of being home alone was something I always cherished, a chance to unwind without the backdrop of my parents' constant bustling. It was a rare weekend they decided to visit some relatives out of town, leaving me with the house to myself. A perfect opportunity, I thought, to indulge in a horror movie marathon, my guilty pleasure. The first movie of the night was an old classic, its grainy scenes and predictable jump scares more comforting than terrifying. I settled deeper into the couch, surrounded by the soft glow of the TV, letting the familiar suspense wash over me. It was during one of the movie's climactic moments that I first heard it, a dull thud from the basement, as if something heavy had been dropped. I paused the movie, a frown creasing my brow, and listened intently. Silence greeted me, thick and unyielding. Chuckling to myself for being so easily spooked, I unpaused the film, attributing the noise to the house settling or some other mundane explanation. But then it came again, louder this time, accompanied by a dragging sound that chilled me to the bone. This was no house settling. Something was down there. The film's eerie score suddenly seemed too real, too close to my own unfolding horror story. With a deep, steadying breath, I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, my resolve bolstered by the absurd notion that I was just investigating a scene from my own personal horror flick. Approaching the basement door, I could feel the air around me grow colder, a stark reminder of the night's unexpected turn. I told myself it was probably just an animal that had snuck in, seeking shelter. "Yeah, that's it," I muttered, trying to sound convincing. My hand found the doorknob, cold and unyielding, and with a push the door swung open, revealing the yawning darkness of the stairwell below. I descended, each step creaking underfoot, the beam from my flashlight slicing through the blackness. The basement, cluttered with years of forgotten belongings, looked eerie in the flickering light, shadows dancing along the walls. I moved slowly, my heart racing with every small sound, and then I saw her, an old woman, standing in the farthest corner of the basement. Her appearance was startling. Wild hair framed a gaunt face, and her eyes, oh, her eyes, they bore into me, filled with an unfathomable darkness. For a moment, I was frozen, disbelief and fear warring within me. This had to be a hallucination, a trick of the mind induced by too many horror movies. But then she moved, her actions defying her frail appearance, advancing towards me with an unsettling agility. Her hands reached out, as if craving something only she could comprehend. Instinct took over, and I turned to flee, my steps clumsy with panic. I could hear her behind me, the sound of her pursuit a relentless echo in the cramped space. I reached the stairs and threw myself up them, slamming the basement door shut and locking it in a frantic rush. Pressed against the door, I fought to catch my breath, my thoughts racing. Who was she? How had she gotten into my house? Before I could settle on an answer, a soft thud against the door made me jump, followed by another, and then another. She was still there on the other side, trying to reach me. Gripped by a fear I had never known, I dialed 911, my voice shaking as I explained there was someone in my house. The operator's calm voice was a lifeline, promising that help was on its way. Waiting for the police, those minutes stretched into an eternity, each thud against the door a stark reminder of the nightmare unfolding around me. When the police finally arrived, their presence was a balm to my frayed nerves. They conducted a thorough search of the basement, their flashlights piercing the shadows I had fled from. But it was empty. No sign of the old woman, no evidence that anyone had been there at all. The officers suggested gently that perhaps my imagination had gotten the best of me, fueled by the late hour and my movie choice. But I knew what I had seen was real, even if there was no proof to support my claims. With the police gone and the house once again silent, the weight of the night's event settled heavily on my shoulders. I couldn't stay there, not with the memory of her haunting gaze. I packed a bag and left, seeking refuge at a friend's house, the image of the old woman etched into my mind. To this day, the experience remains unexplained, a chilling encounter that defies logic. Was she a ghost, a figment of my overactive imagination, or something else entirely? The fear I felt was undeniably real, a haunting reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved.